AE7TO here. In the previous video I showed you how to install and configure HF Sounder, which again is a Java application that works in conjunction with Fldigi to test each of 5 frequencies between 2 amateur radio HF stations in order to determine which of those frequencies offers the best propagation conditions or signal noise ratio. What you see on your screen right now is first of all a remote desktop setting to a station that is an IC735 configured as the remote site. I've clicked the start button, which causes the software to go into a waiting for the scheduled time mode, and in the background here you see another Fldigi window. This is on a IC7300 where I'm sitting, and it also has another instance of HF Sounder, this time configured as net controller. So at the appointed time, which is just about 4 minutes from now, both stations will switch to this first frequency on the 80 meter band. The remote site will transmit, the local net control site will listen, and then in the next minute they'll both switch to the next band, which is 60 meters. Again, the remote site will transmit, the net control site will listen. That'll continue for the first 5 minutes, and after the remote site is transmitted on each of those bands and the net control site has recorded the signal noise ratio on each band, it will then, because this button is checked right here, will automatically select one of the 5 bands, and then it will send a reply back on only that band that essentially says we're going to switch to and operate on this band. A couple of details on the Fldigi configuration. Make sure the RxID and TXID buttons are selected on both stations so that if either station decides that the band conditions don't support a particular mode, they can make a change to their operating mode, and then that change will be communicating using the RSID to the other end, and then both stations can automatically switch. You also want to make sure the PSM button is selected. That will cause transmit to be inhibited if there's another station in the frequency that's configured for the sounding. And lastly, make sure that this cursor is set to the same value in both stations. Typically 1500 hertz for the cursor would be good. So we are just about ready to kick off in 2 minutes, just under 2 minutes. Again, this window is the remote site. It will be the first to transmit. And you'll be able to see in the net control station's waterfall when those transmissions take place. We're about 1 minute and 20 seconds now. You're normally going to want to have some kind of SOP for your organization that dictates when you do your soundings. You may agree after setting up on site that you'll all turn your radios on at some specified time and perform a sounding. And you're also going to want to have a lost communication procedure. For example, you may agree that if you lose communications to sound during the first 10 minutes and perhaps 30 minutes after each hour until connection is reestablished. It's up to your own imagination what kind of procedures you want to use. I will mention too that I'm going to be operating in very low power mode because these stations are not far apart. This little window here shows the auto tuner at the remote station, and I may not have the power level high enough to even trigger an auto tune, so even though I've trained memory, it may not detect the frequency and make tuning changes, but it won't matter at such a low power level, so it'll go ahead and proceed anyway. We're about 15 seconds out now. 8, 5, and it's time. You see a tuning countdown here. That could be used if you were going to do a manual tuning. just to make sure you have enough time to do it. And then after the tuning procedure, there's a brief pause and the standard tuning message is transmitted. See, it's being received here. And I'm going to go ahead and dial the power back even further at the remote station. There's no sense in transmitting at a higher power level than necessary. I'd also like to have some kind of difference between the SNRs on the various bands. So you can see the message was received, not entirely without errors, but the QSN was received. That's the key part. And here we see the text that was received, the signal to noise ratio, and you will notice in the local station's HF sounder that frequency changed to green in order to indicate that the signal was received, and you see that the signal noise ratio was recorded in this little window here. So again, at the end of the sequence, the net control station will record every SNR, choose the one with the highest one, and then because this is checked, it will go ahead and automatically select the best band. You can make that choice yourself by unchecking this and then clicking the radio button. Just make sure you do it before the 5th minute kicks off or you're going to miss your window. Coming up on the next minute. There we go. We're now on the 40 meter band. There's the tuning signal. And there's the message. If at any time you decide that you don't want the transmission to continue, perhaps because you see somebody else's signal in there and you don't want to step on them, all you have to do is go to the Fldigi controls. If it's a tune, you can uncheck the tune button. If it's a message transmission, you just toggle the TXRX button down at the bottom. You can see how we can monitor progress in the remote station. These two time slots have completed. We're now in the 2nd or the 2-minute time slot. Just jumped into the 3-minute time slot. There's your tuning for 5 seconds. So far, the strongest signal was received on the 40 meter band. Even though I attenuated the outgoing signal, that's probably because the antenna I'm using right now is pretty well optimized for that band. These log windows, by the way, are saved to the sounder.log file upon program completion, and if you launch the program again, the new log will be appended to the old, so you've got a permanent record of when you transmitted and what signal to noise ratio you received on each band. Again, every time a signal is successfully received on a band, it turns green, and so far the winner is the 40 meter band. Okay, we're now receiving the signal for the 20 meter band. As soon as this finishes, if I was manually selecting a band, I would make my decision pretty darn soon based on what I'm seeing here in the signal noise ratio, I guess here, and then I would check the radio button here so that I have made the choice before the end of the 4th minute, because again, the software is going to hold off until the selected band before it transmits a net control station command to switch to a given operating frequency. Watch the radio buttons. One of them will automatically be selected, probably the 40 meter band. Sure enough, 40 meter band wins. You see the radio button was just selected. And now what's happening is We still have to go through the second half of the 10-minute sequence. The remote station is listening on the 80-meter band just in case that was the one selected by the net control station, but it is not the one that was selected, so the net control will remain silent during this time slot. It's going to wait for the 7-minute time slot in order to transmit the sounding text. So we've got to wait a couple minutes for that to happen. I should emphasize that this software is intended to be supervised. It's a convenience to save you having to juggle all these things during the tuning sequence. So although it automates the process, you still have to observe it and intervene if something goes wrong. Like, for example, somebody touching the antenna or some other signal occupying the prearranged frequencies. We're in the 6-minute time slot. That means the next time slot is the one where the net control is going to transmit its message 30 seconds away. As with Fldigi, this software is available on SourceForge. Just search for HF text sounder or HF-sounder on SourceForge's site. Eight seconds. And it's time. Okay, the local station is transmitting a tuning signal. And it should now be transmitting. There it is. There's the message. And you can see up here that it was received by the remote station. So what should happen next is both stations will acknowledge that the decision has been made, and the log will announce that we're done. There is no need to continue. Once the NCS has sent out this command to tune to a given band, there's no need to continue the sequence. So at the end of this time slot, we're done. And there it is. At the net control station, you see sounding complete, ready to operate on this band, because we're already tuned to it and we've already done a tuning sequence. So the antenna is matched and we're actually ready to transmit. The situation at the remote site is a little bit different. Sounding is complete and we know what band we're on. We're tuned, or we're dialed to it, but our antenna is not yet matched, so we would need to use the tuning button in Fldigi in order to match the antenna, and then we're ready to operate. Again, you can find the software, HF Sounder software, on SourceForge, and there are also some instructions on how to configure and use it there. Make sure you periodically check back. It's very new software. It probably still has some bugs in it, so periodically I'll post new versions out there. Thanks for your time.